The grand ballroom of Valdoria Palace sparkled under the light of 1,000 crystal chandeliers. Princess Victoria stood near the tall windows, her emerald gown catching the light as she watched the celebrations unfold. Tonight marked the 30th anniversary of her brother King Marcus's coronation, and the entire royal family had gathered for the occasion. Victoria's sharp eyes followed Queen Sophia as she glided through the room, greeting diplomats and nobles with practiced grace. The Queen's burgundy dress swept the marble floor, and her famous sapphire tiara caught every eye in the room. But Victoria saw beyond the perfect smile and regal bearing. She noticed the slight tremor in Sophia's hand when she lifted her champagne glass, the way her eyes darted toward the palace doors every few minutes. Prince Alexander, Victoria's nephew and heir to the throne, stood near the orchestra, surrounded by young aristocrats who hung on his every word. At 28, he had grown into everything a future king should be: tall, handsome, diplomatic, and beloved by the people. Victoria's heart ached as she watched him laugh at something one of his companions said. He had no idea that his perfect world was built on a foundation of lies. The princess had discovered the truth 3 weeks ago, quite by accident. She had been searching the royal archives for documents related to a charity initiative when she stumbled upon a file that should have been destroyed years ago. The contents had left her sleepless ever since, wrestling with what to do with the knowledge that could destroy everything her family had built. "Aunt Victoria, you look like you're plotting the downfall of nations," a warm voice said beside her. Victoria turned to find Alexander grinning at her, his blue eyes, so like his father's, twinkling with affection. She forced a smile, though it felt like broken glass in her throat. "Just observing the festivities, dear one," she replied, accepting the fresh glass of champagne he offered her. "Mother says you've been quite withdrawn lately," Alexander said, his voice taking on a note of concern. "She worries you're working too hard with the Refugee Foundation." Victoria's jaw tightened at the mention of Sophia's supposed concern. The Queen had been watching her closely since Victoria had started asking questions about certain financial records from 20 years ago. Sophia was no fool. She must have sensed that something had changed. "Your mother is very observant," Victoria said carefully. Alexander studied her face, and Victoria saw the moment his expression shifted from casual concern to genuine worry. He had always been perceptive, even as a child. It was one of the qualities that would make him an excellent king, if he ever got the chance to prove it. "Aunt Victoria, is everything all right? You know you can talk to me about anything." The irony of his words nearly made her laugh. Could she tell him that his mother had been living under a false identity for 30 years? That the woman he adored, who had raised him with such devotion, was not who she claimed to be? That everything he believed about his family's history was carefully constructed fiction? "Alexander, darling, there you are." Queen Sophia's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She appeared beside them, her smile perfect, but her eyes cold as they met Victoria's. "The ambassador from Kronberg has been asking for you. Something about the trade agreement discussion." Alexander sighed but dutifully kissed his mother's cheek. "Of course. We'll continue this later, Aunt Victoria?" Victoria nodded, watching him disappear into the crowd. When he was gone, Sophia's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something hard and dangerous underneath. "You've been spending a lot of time in the archives lately," the Queen said, her voice pitched low enough that only Victoria could hear. "I've always been interested in our family's history," Victoria replied evenly. "Some history is better left buried, don't you think?" Sophia's fingers tightened on her champagne flute. The past can be so complicated and painful, especially for those we love. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Victoria felt her spine stiffen. For 30 years, she had watched this woman play the role of perfect queen, perfect wife, perfect mother. But now she knew the truth. Sophia was none of those things. She was an imposter who had stolen another woman's life, and Victoria had the proof hidden in her private safe. "Truth has a way of surfacing, Sophia," Victoria said quietly, "no matter how deep we try to bury it." The Queen's smile never wavered, but Victoria saw the flash of fear in her eyes. "Then we must be very careful about how we handle the truth, mustn't we? For Alexander's sake." Before Victoria could respond, King Marcus appeared at his wife's side, sliding an arm around her waist. Victoria's brother looked older than his 55 years, the crown having aged him as it did all who wore it. But his love for Sophia remained as obvious as it had been the day he married her. "My two favorite women, together as always," Marcus said warmly. "Though you both look rather serious for such a celebratory evening." "We were just discussing the Refugee Foundation," Sophia lied smoothly. "Victoria has such ambitious plans for the coming year." Marcus beamed at his sister. "Victoria has always had the biggest heart in the family. Mother used to say she would either become a saint or a revolutionary." "Perhaps both," Victoria murmured, her eyes never leaving Sophia's face. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and formal dances. Victoria went through the motions, smiling and chatting with guests, while her mind churned with the weight of her secret. She watched Alexander dance with various young ladies, all hoping to catch the prince's eye. She watched Marcus and Sophia perform their practiced waltz, looking every inch the devoted royal couple. She watched the court photographer capture perfect moments that would appear in tomorrow's papers, showing the royal family in all their glory. No one would guess that their princess carried knowledge that could bring it all crashing down. It was nearly midnight when Victoria finally retreated to her private apartments in the east wing of the palace. Her lady's maid, Elena, helped her out of the heavy gown and into a comfortable silk robe. Elena had served Victoria for 15 years and knew her moods better than anyone. "Shall I have some tea sent up, Your Highness?" Elena asked, noting the tension in Victoria's shoulders. "Yes, please. And Elena, make sure no one disturbs me tonight. I have a great deal to think about." When she was finally alone, Victoria went to her private study and opened the hidden safe behind a portrait of her late mother. Inside lay the file that had changed everything: photographs, documents, and sworn testimonies that proved Queen Sophia was actually Anna Volkov, a former intelligence officer from the neighboring kingdom of Moravia. The real Sophia Kellner had died in a car accident 30 years ago, just weeks before she was to marry Prince Marcus. Anna Volkov, who bore a striking resemblance to the dead woman, had somehow taken her place. The substitution had been so perfect that no one had suspected, not Marcus, not the court, not even Victoria herself, until she found these documents. But the deception went deeper than just a stolen identity. The papers revealed that Anna had been planted as part of a long-term intelligence operation. For 3 decades, she had been feeding information to Moravian intelligence while playing the role of devoted queen. Trade secrets, military positions, diplomatic strategies, all of it had been compromised. Victoria picked up a photograph of the real Sophia Kellner, taken just days before her death. She had been beautiful, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. This was the woman Marcus thought he had married. This was the woman who should have been Alexander's mother. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Victoria quickly returned the file to the safe and called out, "Come in." To her surprise, it was Alexander who entered, still in his formal uniform but with his collar loosened and his hair slightly mussed. "I'm sorry to disturb you so late, Aunt Victoria," he said, "but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong earlier. You looked at Mother as if she were a stranger." Victoria's heart clenched. Even now, even knowing what she knew, it was hard to reconcile the woman who had raised Alexander with such apparent love with the spy who had deceived them all. "Sit down, Alexander," she said gently, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. He sat, his blue eyes searching her face with an intensity that reminded her painfully of Marcus at that age. "Whatever it is, I can handle it. I'm not a child anymore." "No, you're not," Victoria agreed. "You're a man, and soon you'll be king. But Alexander, some truths change everything. Once you know them, you can never go back to the way things were before." Alexander leaned forward, his hands clasped between his knees. "Is it about Mother? I've noticed things too, you know. The way she sometimes pauses before answering certain questions, as if she's remembering a script. The way she never talks about her childhood or her family. I used to think it was just because her parents died when she was young, but—" Victoria was stunned. She had underestimated her nephew's perceptiveness. "How long have you suspected something?" "I'm not sure I'd call it suspicion exactly," Alexander said slowly. "More like awareness that there were pieces missing. Father never seems to notice, but then he's always been blind when it comes to Mother. He loves her too much to see clearly." "And you?" Victoria asked carefully. "Do you love her too much to see clearly?" Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "I love the mother who sang me lullabies and stayed by my bed when I was sick. I love the woman who taught me to ride and to dance and to think before I speak. But lately, I've wondered if I really know her at all." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. This remarkable young man was already preparing himself for heartbreak, sensing that his world was about to shift beneath his feet. "If I told you something about your mother, something that would change everything, would you want to know?" she asked. Alexander's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked older than his years. "A king can't afford to hide from the truth, no matter how painful. And I'd rather hear it from someone who loves me than discover it from an enemy who might use it against us." Victoria stood and walked to the window, looking out at the palace gardens bathed in moonlight. Somewhere out there, guards patrolled the grounds, protecting the royal family from external threats. But how could they protect against a threat that had lived among them for 30 years? "Give me time," she said finally. "There are things I need to verify, documents I need to secure. This isn't just about our family, Alexander. This is about the security of the kingdom itself." Alexander rose and came to stand beside her. "Whatever it is, we'll face it together. The family motto, remember? United we stand, divided we fall." Victoria turned and embraced her nephew, holding him tightly. "You're going to be a wonderful king," she whispered. "With you beside me, how could I be anything else?" he replied, returning the embrace. After Alexander left, Victoria sat at her desk and began to write. She would need allies for what was to come, trusted members of the cabinet who could help navigate the crisis without destroying the monarchy itself. She would need to secure all the evidence and make copies in case Sophia tried to destroy the originals. Most importantly, she would need to find a way to protect Alexander from the fallout of his mother's deception. As dawn broke over Valdoria Palace, Princess Victoria sealed the last of her letters. In 3 days, there would be a family dinner. Just Marcus, Sophia, Alexander, and herself. That would be when she revealed the truth. She had given Sophia 30 years of stolen life. She would not give her 1 day more. The princess looked at the portrait of her mother one last time before leaving her study. Queen Catherine had been known for her wisdom and her courage. Victoria prayed she had inherited both, for she would need them in the days to come. Outside her window, the palace began to wake. Servants hurried through the corridors, preparing for another day of royal routine. Guards changed shifts with military precision. In the kitchens, chefs began preparing breakfast for the royal family. Everything appeared normal, peaceful, perfect. But Victoria knew that beneath the polished surface, cracks were beginning to form. The truth she carried was like water seeping into those cracks, expanding them slowly but inexorably. Soon the facade would crumble, and everyone would see what lay beneath. She thought of Alexander's words. A king can't afford to hide from the truth. He was right, of course, but knowing the truth and surviving it were two very different things. As Victoria prepared to face the day, she wondered if their family, if their kingdom, was strong enough to weather the storm that was coming. In her own apartments, Queen Sophia stood at her window, watching the sunrise. She had not slept, could not sleep, knowing that Victoria had discovered something. The princess had always been too clever, too observant. Sophia had managed to deflect her questions for weeks, but tonight she had seen the determination in Victoria's eyes. The game was almost over. 30 years of careful deception, of living another woman's life, of loving a man and raising a son while serving two masters. She thought of Alexander, sleeping peacefully in his rooms, unaware that his mother was a fraud. She thought of Marcus, who had given her his whole heart, never suspecting that she had come to him as a weapon aimed at his kingdom. But somewhere along the way, the mission had become real life. The love she was supposed to feign had become genuine. The son she bore as part of her cover had become the center of her world. The kingdom she was meant to betray had become her home. Sophia, Anna, whoever she was now, closed her eyes and made a decision. She would not run. Whatever Victoria planned to do, she would face it. She owed Alexander that much. She owed Marcus that much. After 30 years of lies, perhaps it was time for truth, even if that truth destroyed them all. The sun climbed higher, painting Valdoria Palace in shades of gold and rose. A new day had begun, bringing with it the promise of revelation and the threat of ruin. In 3 days, at a simple family dinner, a princess would speak words that would echo through history, and a kingdom would never be the same. The morning sun cast long shadows through the Parliament building as Lord Chancellor Edmund Hartley reviewed the documents Princess Victoria had secretly delivered to his home the night before. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he read through the evidence for the 3rd time, each page more damning than the last. Edmund had served 3 monarchs in his lifetime, dedicating 40 years to the crown. He had weathered political storms, navigated international crises, and upheld the law without fear or favor. But nothing had prepared him for this. The revelation that their beloved queen was a foreign intelligence asset who had been deceiving them for 3 decades. He looked up as his private secretary entered the office. "Cancel all my morning appointments, James, and summon the heads of royal security. Discreetly." The younger man's eyebrows rose slightly, but he had worked for the Lord Chancellor long enough to know when not to ask questions. "Yes, my lord. Shall I use the secure line?" "Most definitely. And James, not a word of this to anyone. The very stability of the kingdom depends upon it." As his secretary hurried away, Edmund returned to the documents. Princess Victoria had been thorough in her investigation. Bank records showing mysterious deposits to accounts linked to the Queen. Coded messages intercepted, but never properly decoded until now. Photographs of Anna Volkov from her training days in Moravian intelligence, her face unmistakably that of the woman who now wore the crown of Valdoria. The Lord Chancellor removed his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. In 2 days, this information would be revealed to the king and the prince. He could only imagine the devastation it would cause. Marcus had loved Sophia with a devotion that bordered on obsession. And Alexander. The boy had grown up believing his mother hung the moon and stars. Meanwhile, in the palace's east wing, Princess Victoria met secretly with General Harrison Webb, head of the Royal Guard. The general was one of the few people she trusted completely, having served her father before his death and proven his loyalty countless times over. "Your Highness," the general said, his military bearing rigid despite the shock evident on his face, "these allegations, if they're true, They are true, Harrison, Victoria said firmly. I've verified everything 3 times over. The question now is how we handle this without destroying the monarchy or endangering the kingdom. General Webb studied the photographs of the real Sophia Kellner's accident scene. It wasn't an accident, was it? They killed her to make room for their operative. That's my conclusion as well. A young woman with no close family engaged to a foreign prince, she was the perfect target for replacement. What do you need from me, Your Highness? Victoria met his steady gaze. When I reveal this to my brother, there's no telling how he'll react. He might try to protect her, might refuse to believe it, or he might... She paused, unable to voice the fear that Marcus might do something desperate in his grief and rage. You want me to have men ready to secure the queen if necessary, the general finished. Discreetly. I don't want to turn this into a public spectacle. If we can handle this quietly, within the family first, we might be able to control the narrative and protect the crown's reputation. General Webb nodded slowly. I'll handpick a small team. Men I trust absolutely. They'll be ready when you need them. After the general left, Victoria found herself wandering the palace galleries, staring at portraits of past queens. Each had faced their own challenges, their own secrets and scandals, but none had perpetrated a deception on this scale. She paused before a portrait of Queen Sophia, painted 10 years ago for her 40th birthday. The artist had captured her beauty perfectly, the warm brown eyes, the gentle smile, the regal bearing that seemed so natural. Looking at it now, Victoria wondered how much of what they had all seen was real and how much was carefully crafted performance. It's a beautiful portrait, isn't it? Victoria's heart nearly stopped as Queen Sophia materialized beside her, moving with the silent grace that Victoria now recognized as intelligence training rather than royal deportment. Yes, Victoria managed, keeping her voice steady. The artist captured you perfectly. Sophia studied the painting with an unreadable expression. Did he? Sometimes I wonder if anyone has ever truly captured me. We all wear masks, don't we, Victoria? Show different faces to different people. The loving wife, the devoted mother, the gracious queen. But which one is real? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Victoria felt her pulse quicken. Was this a confession, a threat, or simply the musings of a woman who sensed her time was running out? I believe we are most real with those we love, Victoria said carefully. Our children especially see us as we truly are. Sophia's composure cracked slightly, pain flickering across her features. Yes, children have a way of seeing through our pretenses, don't they? Alexander has always been perceptive. Even as a little boy, he would look at me sometimes as if he could see straight through to my soul. And what did he see there? Sophia turned to face Victoria fully, and for a moment, the mask dropped entirely. Victoria saw exhaustion, fear, and something that might have been regret. He saw a mother who would do anything to protect him, Sophia said quietly. Whatever you think you know, Victoria, remember that. Everything I've done, every choice I've made in the last 20 years, has been for him. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Victoria replied. Then I've been walking that road for longer than you can imagine. Sophia straightened, the queenly mask sliding back into place. The family dinner in 2 days. I assume that's when you plan to reveal whatever you've discovered? Victoria's silence was answer enough. Sophia nodded slowly. Then I have 2 days left to be his mother. 2 days before his world comes crashing down. I suppose I should be grateful you're giving me that much. She turned to leave, but paused at the doorway. Victoria? When you destroy me, and you will destroy me, we both know that. Please be gentle with him. He's stronger than Marcus in many ways, but this will break his heart." After Sophia left, Victoria sank onto a nearby bench, emotionally drained. She had expected denial, threats, perhaps even violence. She had not expected this quiet acknowledgement, this mother's plea for mercy for her son. Across the palace, Prince Alexander noticed the strange tension that had settled over his home like a fog. Servants whispered in corners and fell silent when he approached. His mother drifted through the halls like a ghost, spending hours in his childhood nursery, running her fingers over old toys and photographs. His father seemed oblivious to it all, busy with state matters and preparations for an upcoming trade summit. But Alexander had inherited his aunt's observational skills, and he knew something momentous was approaching. He found his mother in the music room that evening, playing the piano with a melancholy air. The piece was unfamiliar to him, a haunting melody that seemed to speak of loss and longing. "I don't recognize that piece," he said, settling beside her on the bench. Sophia's fingers stilled on the keys. "It's an old Moravian lullaby. My grandmother used to sing it to me when I was very small." Alexander frowned slightly. "I thought you said your grandparents died before you were born." For a moment, his mother looked stricken. Then she smiled sadly. "Did I? I must have meant my nurse. She was like a grandmother to me." It was a clumsy lie, and they both knew it. Alexander felt something cold settle in his stomach. His aunt's warnings echoed in his mind. Some truths change everything. "Mother," he said gently, "whatever it is that's causing this distance between you and Aunt Victoria, whatever secret you're both keeping, you can tell me. I'm not a child anymore." Sophia cupped his face in her hands, studying him as if trying to memorize every detail. "My beautiful boy, you have your father's eyes but my stubborn streak. It's going to serve you well when what?" She dropped her hands and turned back to the piano. "When you're king, you'll need that strength, that determination. Promise me something, Alexander. Whatever happens, whatever you learn about me, remember that my love for you was never a lie. It was the truest thing in my life." "Mother, you're frightening me." "I'm frightening myself," she admitted. "But fear can be useful. It keeps us sharp, makes us appreciate what we have while we have it." She began playing again, the melancholy melody filling the room. "Sit with me a while, like when you were small and couldn't sleep." Alexander remained with his mother for hours, listening to her play, sensing that these might be among their last peaceful moments together. Neither spoke of the gathering storm, but both felt its approach. The next morning brought a flurry of quiet activity. Lord Chancellor Hartley met with the Minister of Justice and the head of the Intelligence Service, briefing them on the situation in strictest confidence. Plans were made for every contingency. If the Queen fled, if she resisted, if foreign agents attempted to extract her. General Webb positioned his most trusted men strategically throughout the palace. To any observer, nothing seemed amiss, but Victoria noticed the subtle changes in guard rotations, the way certain exits were now more heavily watched. King Marcus, still unaware of the drama unfolding around him, spent the day in meetings with agricultural ministers, discussing drought relief for the eastern provinces. He seemed puzzled by his wife's subdued mood at lunch, but attributed it to fatigue from the recent celebrations. "You should rest, my darling," he told Sophia, kissing her forehead tenderly. "You've been pushing yourself too hard lately." Sophia caught his hand and held it tightly. "Marcus, you know I love you, don't you? Despite everything, you must know that." The king smiled, the expression transforming his careworn face. "Of course I know. You've shown me every day for 30 years. What's brought this on?" "Nothing. Everything. Sometimes I just need to say it out loud." That evening, Princess Victoria made final preparations. She arranged the evidence in chronological order, building an irrefutable case. She practiced what she would say, how she would break the news that would shatter her brother's world. She even prepared for the possibility that Marcus might turn on her, might refuse to believe the truth even when confronted with proof. A soft knock interrupted her preparations. She opened the door to find Alexander, dressed casually in riding clothes, his expression troubled. "Going somewhere?" she asked. "I couldn't sleep. Thought a ride might clear my head." He hesitated. "Aunt Victoria, I've been thinking about what you said, about truth and consequences. I want you to know that whatever you're planning to reveal tomorrow night, I trust you. You've never lied to me, never led me astray. If you say something needs to be exposed, then I believe you." Victoria felt tears threaten. This wonderful young man, showing such courage in the face of the unknown. "You humble me, Alexander. I pray I prove worthy of your trust." "You already have 1,000 times over." He kissed her cheek. "Try to get some sleep. Tomorrow will come whether we're ready or not." After he left, Victoria allowed herself a moment of weakness, sinking into her chair and covering her face with her hands. Tomorrow, she would destroy her brother's happiness and shatter her nephew's world. She would expose a deception that could topple the government and endanger national security, all for the sake of truth. She thought of her mother's words, spoken long ago. "The crown is heavy, my dear, but not as heavy as a secret that could destroy everything we've sworn to protect." In her own rooms, Queen Sophia, Anna Volkov, sat at her writing desk, penning letter after letter. Some were to contacts in Moravia, warning them that her cover was blown and they should destroy any records linking her to ongoing operations. Others were more personal, letters to Alexander, to Marcus, trying to explain the inexplicable. She sealed each envelope carefully, knowing they might never be delivered. If Victoria had found the evidence she thought she had, then tomorrow night, Anna Volkov would cease to exist. Queen Sophia would be exposed as a fraud. The woman who had lived between two identities for 30 years would finally have to choose who she really was. She thought of the young intelligence officer she had been, burning with patriotic fervor, ready to sacrifice everything for her country. She thought of the frightened woman who had stepped into a dead girl's life, terrified that every moment would be her last. She thought of the wife who had fallen genuinely in love with the man she was meant to deceive. She thought of the mother who had held her newborn son and felt her carefully constructed walls crumble. Somewhere along the way, the lie had become the truth. Anna Volkov had died, and Sophia had been born from her ashes. But Victoria was about to resurrect the dead, and Sophia wondered if anyone would survive the aftermath. The palace clock chimed midnight. One more day. One more day to be a queen, a wife, a mother. One more day before the masquerade ended and the music stopped. In his study, King Marcus worked late into the night, unaware that his wife wandered the halls like a ghost saying silent goodbyes. He made notes for the trade summit, reviewed agricultural reports, and planned improvements to the royal hospitals. He was a good king, dedicated to his people and his duty. Tomorrow night, he would learn that he had been sharing his bed, his crown, and his secrets with an enemy agent for 30 years. Tomorrow night, his love story would be revealed as a carefully orchestrated lie. But tonight, in his innocence, he simply worked and occasionally smiled at the portrait of his wife that hung opposite his desk. Tonight, he was still a man in love with the woman who had given him a son and stood by his side through every challenge. Dawn approached slowly, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Princess Victoria stood at her window, watching the sunrise and steeling herself for what was to come. In 12 hours, the family would gather for dinner. In 13 hours, she would speak the words that would change everything. She thought of Alexander riding through the pre-dawn darkness, trying to outrun the sense of impending doom. She thought of Sophia writing her letters, preparing for the end. She thought of Marcus, sleeping peacefully in his ignorance. "Forgive me," she whispered to the rising sun. "Forgive me for what I must do." The day of reckoning had arrived. By sunset, the royal family of Valdoria would be forever changed. The truth, so long buried, would finally claw its way to the surface, and a kingdom would hold its breath, waiting to see if it would survive the revelation. In the palace kitchens, the chef began preparations for what he had been told would be a simple family dinner. Just the king, queen, prince, and princess. No guests, no ceremony, just family. If only he knew that he was preparing a last supper of sorts, the final meal of a 30-year deception, the end of an era built on lies. The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. Servants noticed the tension that gripped the palace like a vice. The queen barely touched her breakfast. The princess canceled all her appointments. The prince rode for hours, returning mud-splattered and exhausted, but no more at peace than when he had left. Only the king seemed unaffected, going about his daily duties with his usual dedication. He reviewed documents, held audiences, and made decisions that would affect thousands of lives. He was the eye of the storm, calm and unaware while chaos swirled around him. Lord Chancellor Hartley spent the day in conference with the security services, planning for every possible outcome. If the Queen was indeed a Moravian agent, there could be sleeper cells activated, attempts at extraction or assassination. The kingdom's entire intelligence apparatus was quietly put on high alert. General Webb's men took their positions with military precision. Every exit was covered, every possible escape route blocked. If Queen Sophia tried to run, she wouldn't get far, but the general found himself hoping she wouldn't run. After 30 years, she deserved to face her accusers with dignity. As afternoon gave way to evening, a strange quiet settled over the palace. It was as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for the truth to be spoken aloud. Princess Victoria dressed carefully for dinner, choosing a simple black dress that seemed appropriate for the metaphorical funeral she was about to conduct. She pinned her mother's sapphire brooch to her collar, a talisman for courage. Queen Sophia selected a deep purple gown, the color of royalty and penance combined. She wore the diamond necklace Marcus had given her on their 10th anniversary, running her fingers over the stones as if they could anchor her to this life she had built on deception. Prince Alexander wore his military dress uniform, instinctively choosing armor for whatever battle lay ahead. He had spent the day preparing himself mentally, knowing that his life was about to be divided into before and after this night. King Marcus, still blissfully unaware, chose his favorite dinner jacket and hummed while his valet helped him dress. He was looking forward to a quiet evening with his family, a respite from the demands of state. As the clock struck 7, they began making their way to the private dining room. The stage was set. The players were in position. The truth waited in the wings, ready for its entrance. Princess Victoria arrived first, her heart pounding so hard she was certain everyone could hear it. She carried a leather portfolio containing copies of the most crucial evidence. The originals were safe in Lord Chancellor Hartley's possession. Alexander entered next, his face carefully composed, but his eyes betraying his anxiety. He kissed his aunt's cheek and took his seat, his movements precise and controlled. Sophia appeared in the doorway, and for a moment, Victoria saw her as she truly was. Not the queen, not the mother, but the spy who had lived a lie for 3 decades. Their eyes met across the room, and an understanding passed between them. The game was over. "Sophia," Victoria said quietly, "thank you for coming." The queen tilted her head slightly, a ghost of a smile on her lips. "Did I have a choice?" "We always have choices. You made yours 30 years ago. Tonight, we all face the consequences." Before either could say more, King Marcus entered, bringing with him an air of cheerful normalcy that seemed almost obscene given the circumstances. "What a delightful surprise. A family dinner with no state business allowed," he said, kissing his wife's cheek and clapping his son on the shoulder. "We should do this more often." They took their seats at the intimate round table, a family tradition that ensured no one sat at the head. Equal voices, equal value. One of Queen Catherine's innovations that had endured. The first course was served in relative silence. Marcus, finally noticing the tension, looked around the table with growing concern. "Is something wrong? You all look as if you're attending a funeral rather than a family dinner." "In a way we are," Victoria said quietly, setting down her fork. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. Something I've discovered that affects all of us, but especially you and Alexander." The king's expression grew serious. "What is it, Victoria? You're scaring me." Victoria opened the leather portfolio with steady hands. 3 weeks ago, while researching in the royal archives, I discovered some documents that had been misfiled. They led me to an investigation that I desperately wished would prove fruitless. Instead, what I found was worse than I could have imagined. She pulled out the first photograph, the real Sophia Kellner, taken days before her death. "This is Sophia Kellner, the woman you were engaged to marry 30 years ago. She died in what was reported as a car accident, but was almost certainly murder." Marcus froze, his eyes fixed on the photograph. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that the woman sitting across from you is not Sophia Kellner." Victoria's voice was gentle but firm. "Her name is Anna Volkov, and she is an intelligence officer from Moravia who was surgically altered and trained to take Sophia's place." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at his sister as if she had gone mad. Alexander sat perfectly still, his military training keeping him composed even as his world crumbled. And Sophia, Anna, simply closed her eyes, her shoulders sagging as if a great weight had finally become too much to bear. "This is insane," Marcus whispered. "Victoria, how could you say such things?" "Because they're true," Sophia said quietly, opening her eyes. Every head turned to her, and she met her husband's horrified gaze steadily. "Everything she's told you is true, Marcus. My name is Anna Volkov. I was a Moravian intelligence officer. I took Sophia Kellner's place after she was eliminated. I've been lying to you for 30 years. The words hung in the air like a physical presence, undeniable and devastating. Marcus's face went white, then red, then white again. His hands trembled as he pushed back from the table, standing on unsteady legs. "No," he said, his voice barely audible. "No, this is some kind of sick joke. Tell me this is a joke, Sophia. Tell me." "I can't," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, Marcus. I'm so sorry." Alexander hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but Victoria could see the way his jaw clenched, the white-knuckled grip he had on his dinner knife. She tensed, ready to intervene if necessary, but he simply set the knife down with deliberate care and turned to face his mother. "How much of it was a lie?" he asked, his voice eerily calm. "Was any of it real? The bedtime stories, the birthday parties, the times you told me you loved me?" Anna's composure finally shattered completely. "That was all real. My love for you was never a lie, Alexander. You were never supposed to happen. I was supposed to gather intelligence, influence policy, and eventually activate a network of assets. But then I fell in love with your father. And then you were born. And everything changed. I chose you. I chose this family over my mission. I've been protecting you from my handlers for 20 years. Protecting us? Marcus laughed bitterly, the sound sharp and painful. You've been spying on us. Every state secret, every private moment, every whispered confidence in our bed, all of it reported back to our enemies. Not for 20 years, Anna insisted. When Alexander was born, I stopped sending substantive intelligence. I've been feeding them false information, stalling, making excuses. They've threatened to expose me numerous times, but I couldn't betray you anymore. Victoria spread more documents on the table. Bank records, intercepted communications, evidence of Anna's gradual disengagement from her handlers. She's telling the truth about that much. The intelligence flow essentially stopped when Alexander was 8 years old. She's been buying time ever since, probably knowing this day would eventually come. Why should we believe anything she says? Marcus demanded, pacing the room like a caged animal. 30 years of lies. Our entire marriage, our entire life together, all of it built on deception. Not all of it, Anna said desperately. The love was real. The happiness we shared, the family we built, that was real. I became the woman I was pretending to be. Anna Volkov died the day Alexander was born. I've been Sophia ever since in every way that matters. Alexander stood slowly, moving to the window to stare out at the darkening sky. Every way that matters? You've been living as a dead woman, Mother. You stole her life, her name, her future. And what about her family? Did they ever know what really happened to her? Anna flinched. She had no close family. That's why she was chosen. An orphan with a small trust fund, no one to ask questions or notice the subtle differences. Convenient, Alexander said coldly. Tell me, when you were training for this role, did they teach you how to fake a mother's love? Was there a course on bedtime stories and birthday cakes? Stop, Anna whispered. Please, Alexander, you're breaking my heart. I'm breaking your heart? He whirled to face her, his composure finally cracking. You've lied to me every day of my life. Every time you called me your son, every time you said you loved me, you were playing a role. No, that was never a role. You were the one true thing in my false life. You were my redemption, my anchor, my reason for trying to break free from what I'd done. King Marcus sank back into his chair, looking decades older than his years. What happens now? He asked Victoria. What are we supposed to do with this revelation? Victoria had prepared for this question, but the words still came with difficulty. The Lord Chancellor and the heads of security have been briefed. Anna will need to be taken into custody while we assess the full extent of the intelligence breach. The Moravian government will be contacted through diplomatic channels. As for the public cannot know, Marcus said firmly, some of his kingly bearing returning. If this gets out, it won't just destroy our family, it will destabilize the entire kingdom, make us look weak to our enemies, undermine every treaty and agreement we've made in the last 3 decades. You want to cover this up? Alexander asked incredulously. Continue living a lie? I want to protect the crown, Marcus replied. That's what we do, Alexander. We sacrifice our personal happiness for the good of the realm. She has to go, Alexander said flatly. Whatever happens with the public narrative, she cannot remain here. I won't pretend to be the loving son to a woman who doesn't even exist. Anna rose from her chair, her dignity intact despite her tears. You don't have to pretend anything. I'll go. I've already made arrangements. There's a cottage in the northern provinces, isolated and secure. I'll live there under guard, debriefed by your intelligence services, and cause no further harm to this family. That's not enough, Marcus said harshly. You should be in prison. You should be tried for treason. Perhaps. But we both know that won't happen. A public trial would destroy everything you've worked for, everything Alexander will inherit. I'm offering you a solution that protects the crown while ensuring I can never hurt you again. Victoria watched the interplay between them, seeing the moment Marcus's anger gave way to grief. The king looked at his wife, the woman he'd believed was his wife, and she saw his heartbreak written plainly on his face. Did you ever love me? he asked, his voice small and broken. Was any of it real? Anna moved toward him but stopped when he flinched away. I loved you more than I've ever loved anyone except our son. I loved you enough to betray everything I'd ever believed in. I loved you enough to live in constant fear that my past would destroy us. Every day for 30 years, I woke up terrified that it would be the day I lost you. And now you have, Marcus said quietly. Now we've all lost everything. Not everything, Victoria interjected. We still have the kingdom. We still have the truth. And we still have each other. Those of us who are real anyway. The cruelty of the statement made Anna flinch, but she didn't protest. She looked at Alexander one more time, memorizing his face. I know you'll never forgive me, she said softly. I know I have no right to ask. But please, remember the good times. Remember the mother who loved you, even if she wasn't the woman you thought she was. Those moments were real, Alexander. They were the most real things in my life. Alexander turned away, unable or unwilling to respond. Anna took a shaky breath and addressed Victoria. I assume General Webb's men are already in position? Victoria nodded. They'll escort you to your quarters to pack essentials, then to the safe house. You'll be under constant guard, but treated with dignity as long as you cooperate fully with the debriefing. I'll tell them everything, Anna promised. Every operation, every contact, every piece of intelligence I ever gathered or transmitted. It's the least I can do. She turned to leave, then paused at the door. Victoria? Thank you for handling this with such discretion. You could have destroyed me publicly, but you chose to protect the family. Queen Catherine would be proud of the woman you've become. Don't you dare speak of my mother, Victoria said coldly. She was a real queen, not a fabrication. Anna inclined her head in acknowledgement and left the room. The remaining family members sat in stunned silence, processing the devastation of the last hour. Finally, Alexander spoke. What do we tell people? She can't just disappear. A sudden illness, Marcus said mechanically. Something that requires isolation and extended treatment. Eventually, a quiet announcement of her death, a private funeral. We'll mourn the woman we thought she was. And me? Alexander asked. How do I mourn a mother who never existed? Victoria reached for his hand. You mourn the loss of the love you felt, the memories you cherished. Those belong to you, Alexander. They were real in your heart, regardless of her deception. I need time, the prince said, rising abruptly. I need to think, to process this. Excuse me. After he left, Marcus and Victoria sat alone, the weight of the revelation settling over them like a shroud. How did I not see it? Marcus asked. 30 years, Victoria. How could I be so blind? Because you loved her. Because she became the woman you fell in love with. In a strange way, perhaps Anna Volkov did die when she became Sophia. The tragedy is that the transformation came too late to undo the original sin. I feel like such a fool. You're not a fool, Marcus. You're a man who loved his wife and trusted his family. Those are virtues, not failures. Marcus laughed bitterly. Virtues that nearly cost us the kingdom. What other secrets are lurking in our past? Victoria. What other lies have we built our lives upon? I don't know, Victoria admitted. But whatever they are, we'll face them together. That's what real families do. As the night deepened, the palace began the delicate process of adjusting to this new reality. General Webb's men quietly escorted Anna to waiting vehicles, her departure witnessed only by a handful of trusted guards. The cover story was disseminated. The Queen had been diagnosed with a rare condition requiring immediate and intensive treatment at a private facility. Lord Chancellor Hartley worked through the night with intelligence officials, beginning the massive undertaking of assessing 30 years of potential intelligence compromises. Every treaty, every state secret, Every military position would need to be reviewed and potentially revised. Prince Alexander rode out again, pushing his horse to dangerous speeds through the moonlit countryside. He needed movement, needed to outrun the chaos in his mind and heart. Everything he had believed about himself, his family, his very identity had been shattered in a single evening. King Marcus locked himself in his study with a bottle of aged whiskey, staring at photographs of his life with Sophia, or Anna, or whoever she had been. Each image now seemed like evidence of his humiliation, proof of how thoroughly he had been deceived. And Princess Victoria sat in her mother's old sitting room, finally allowing herself to cry. She had done the right thing, the necessary thing, but the cost was almost unbearable. She had saved the kingdom, but destroyed her family. As dawn broke over Valdoria Palace once more, it illuminated a dynasty forever changed. The truth had indeed set them free, but freedom, they were learning, could be its own kind of prison. The secret was out. The masquerade had ended, and in a quiet cottage in the northern provinces, closely guarded and utterly alone, Anna Volkov finally stopped pretending to be Sophia. She sat at a simple wooden table and began to write. Not intelligence reports or coded messages, but the true story of a woman who had lost herself so completely in a lie that the lie had become her truth. Perhaps someday, when the wounds had healed and the anger had faded, someone would read her words and understand. Perhaps Alexander would one day forgive the mother who had loved him with a fierce reality that transcended her false identity. Perhaps Marcus would remember the joy they had shared and find some peace in knowing that her love, at least, had been genuine. Or perhaps not. Perhaps some betrayals were too deep to forgive, some lies too fundamental to overlook. Anna, for she was Anna again now, would live with that uncertainty for the rest of her days. In the palace, life went on. The crown endured as it always had. But in the hearts of a king, a prince, and a princess, something precious had died. Trust, once shattered, could never be fully restored. The kingdom of Valdoria would survive this crisis, as it had survived so many others. But the royal family would never be the same. 6 months had passed since the night that shattered the royal family of Valdoria. The palace, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt like a beautiful mausoleum, its halls echoing with the ghosts of happier times. Prince Alexander stood in his mother's former study, supervising the packing of her remaining belongings. The room had been sealed since her departure, but now it was time to clear it out. Each item uncovered was like a small wound reopening, a jewelry box he'd made her in woodworking class at age 12, photographs from family holidays, the piano sheet music for the lullabies she used to play. "Your Highness," his secretary said softly from the doorway, "the intelligence briefing is in 20 minutes. Alexander nodded, not trusting his voice. These monthly briefings had become routine. Updates on the ongoing debriefing of Anna Volkov and the systematic review of 3 decades of potentially compromised intelligence. So far, they had uncovered 12 Moravian assets embedded in various government positions, all recruited through information Anna had provided in her early years. The prince made his way to the secure conference room where Lord Chancellor Hartley and General Webb waited with their latest report. His father would not be attending. King Marcus had thrown himself into state duties with an almost manic fervor, working 18-hour days and avoiding anything that reminded him of his former life. "Your Highness," the Lord Chancellor began once Alexander was seated. "We've completed our interrogation of the former queen. She has been entirely cooperative, providing details about Moravian intelligence operations that our analysts call unprecedented in scope and value." "Has she asked about us?" Alexander heard himself say, then immediately regretted the question. General Webb's expression softened slightly. Every day, Your Highness. She asks about you and His Majesty, though we've provided no information as per the standing orders. Alexander forced himself to focus on the briefing, learning about the dismantling of spy networks and the quiet diplomatic pressure being applied to Moravia. What struck him most was how much damage Anna had prevented rather than caused. In her 20 years of passive resistance, she had saved Valdoria from at least 3 major intelligence disasters by feeding false information to her handlers. She was playing both sides, Alexander observed, protecting us while maintaining her cover. Indeed, Lord Chancellor Hartley agreed. It doesn't excuse her actions, but it does complicate the narrative. The Prime Minister of Moravia has privately indicated they would be willing to make substantial reparations to avoid public exposure of this operation. My father won't accept blood money. No, but he might accept favorable trade agreements and intelligence sharing that would benefit the kingdom. We must be pragmatic, Your Highness. After the briefing, Alexander found himself wandering the palace gardens where he had played as a child. Every path held memories. Here, where his mother had taught him to identify different flowers. There, where she had comforted him after he fell from a tree. Everywhere the ghost of a woman who might have been a lie but whose love had felt real. I thought I might find you here. Alexander turned to find his Aunt Victoria approaching, looking older and more careworn than he'd ever seen her. The weight of her decision showed in every line of her face. How do you bear it? He asked her. Knowing you destroyed our family? By remembering that living a lie would have destroyed us more slowly but just as surely, she replied, and by hoping that someday you'll build something better from the ruins. Father barely speaks to me. He looks at me and sees her face. I'm a constant reminder of his humiliation. Victoria took his arm, guiding him to a stone bench overlooking the rose garden. Your father is grieving, Alexander, not just for the woman he lost, but for the life he thought he lived. Give him time. How much time? It's been 6 months. The kingdom needs leadership, and he's hiding behind paperwork and protocol. Then perhaps it's time for the heir to step forward. You're 29 now. Well-trained and respected. Begin taking on more responsibilities. Show the court and the people that the monarchy remains strong. Alexander considered this. The people. What happens when they find out? We can't maintain this fiction forever. No, we can't. Which is why the council has been discussing a controlled revelation. Better to shape the narrative ourselves than have it exposed by our enemies. The prince's blood ran cold. You want to tell the world that their queen was a spy? We want to tell them a story of redemption, Victoria corrected. A woman who came to destroy but chose to protect. A love that transcended national boundaries. A prince who represents the future, unbowed by the sins of the past. You want to use my pain as propaganda. I want to transform your pain into purpose. The monarchy has survived by adapting, by taking our wounds and making them our strength. This is no different. That evening, Alexander attended a state dinner for the first time since his mother's departure. The empty chair beside his father spoke volumes, but the prince held his head high and engaged the visiting ambassadors with intelligence and charm. He saw the approval in the minister's eyes, the relief that the heir was stepping into the breach. King Marcus said nothing to his son during the dinner, but Alexander caught him watching several times, something almost like pride flickering in his haunted eyes. After the guests departed, Alexander lingered in the dining room. His father stood by the window, staring out at the city lights below. You did well tonight, Marcus said without turning. Your mother would be... She would be proud. It was the first time in 6 months that Marcus had mentioned her as anything other than the former queen or that woman. I learned from watching you, Alexander replied carefully. Both of you. Marcus's shoulders tensed. What you learned from her was built on deception. Was it? She taught me compassion, duty, sacrifice. She taught me to put the kingdom's needs before my own desires. The fact that she was Anna Volkov instead of Sophia Kellner doesn't change the lessons. Doesn't it? Marcus turned to face his son, and Alexander was shocked by how much weight his father had lost. Every word from her mouth was calculated, every gesture designed to manipulate. For the first 10 years, perhaps, but what about when she refused to provide intelligence that would have compromised our naval defenses? What about when she warned our agents about a trap in Prague, saving 12 lives? What about when she held my hand through scarlet fever, never leaving my bedside for 5 days? Stop. Marcus's voice was raw. Just stop. I can't. Because if we don't find a way to reconcile the woman she became with the spy she was, we'll never heal. The kingdom will never heal. Marcus sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of his years. How can you forgive her? I haven't, Alexander admitted. I may never fully forgive her, but I can acknowledge that people are complex, that redemption is possible, that love, even born from deception, can become real. You're stronger than I am, Marcus said quietly. No, I just have less to lose. You lost your wife, the love of your life. I lost my mother, but I still have my father. If you'll let me. For the first time in 6 months, Marcus looked directly at his son. You have her eyes. I used to love that, seeing her in your face. Now you need to see me, Alexander, your son, the future king, not her shadow. Marcus nodded slowly. Help me, he whispered. I don't know how to move forward. Alexander knelt beside his father's chair, taking his hands. Together. We move forward together. 2 months later, the palace announced that Queen Sophia's illness had taken a tragic turn. She had passed away peacefully in her sleep at the private facility. The kingdom mourned. Flags flew at half-mast, and a state funeral was held. The coffin was empty, of course. Anna Volkov still lived in her closely guarded cottage. But the symbolism mattered. Prince Alexander delivered the eulogy, speaking of a mother's love and dedication, of service to the kingdom, of the complicated nature of human lives. Those who knew the truth heard the layers of meaning. Those who didn't heard a son honoring his mother. Both were true in their own ways. Princess Victoria watched from the royal gallery, tears streaming down her face. She had saved the kingdom, but at such a cost. Her brother remained distant, cordial but cold. Her nephew was rebuilding himself piece by piece. And somewhere in the northern provinces, a woman lived in exile, paying for sins that had transformed into sacrifices. After the funeral, life in the palace began to shift. King Marcus, with Alexander's support, slowly emerged from his self-imposed isolation. Father and son appeared together at public events, projecting stability and continuity. The kingdom responded with relief and renewed confidence in the monarchy, but the secret remained, a ticking bomb that could explode at any moment. Lord Chancellor Hartley and his team worked tirelessly to prepare for that eventuality, crafting contingency plans and media strategies. The revelation came, as these things often do, from an unexpected source. A Moravian intelligence officer, bitter about being abandoned by his government after Anna's network was rolled up, sold his story to an international newspaper. Within hours, the news was everywhere. Queen Sophia of Valdoria had been a spy. The palace was ready. Within an hour of the story breaking, they released a comprehensive statement acknowledging the basic facts while providing crucial context. They revealed Anna's transformation from enemy agent to protector, her decades of refusing to harm the kingdom she had come to love, her cooperation in dismantling the entire network. Prince Alexander gave a televised address that would be remembered as one of the defining moments of Valdorian history. He spoke without notes, his voice steady and clear. My fellow Valdorians, today you have learned a truth that my family has grappled with for 8 months. the woman you knew as Queen Sophia, was born Anna Volkov, sent here as an enemy agent. But I stand before you as living proof that people can change, that love can transform even the darkest intentions into light. The mother who raised me, who devoted herself to charitable causes, who stood beside my father in service to this nation, that woman was real. Her name may have been false, but her dedication became true. For 20 years, she protected this kingdom from the very forces that sent her here, at great personal risk. I do not ask you to forgive the deception. I do not ask you to forget the betrayal of trust. I ask only that you judge us not by the circumstances of her arrival, but by the reality of her service. And I ask that you allow my father and myself to continue serving you, to prove that the monarchy remains strong, honest, and devoted to Valdoria's future. The speech was met with mixed reactions. Some called for the monarchy to be abolished, unable to accept such a fundamental breach of trust. Others were moved by the prince's honesty and the strange tale of redemption. Most fell somewhere in between, uncertain but willing to wait and see. King Marcus, inspired by his son's courage, gave his own address a week later. He spoke of love, of deception, of the crushing weight of discovering that your life was built on lies. But he also spoke of moving forward, of not letting the past define the future, of his absolute faith in his son and the institution they served. I was a fool, he said simply. A fool in love, blind to deception. But I was also a king who, even in my blindness, served you faithfully. I ask for your patience as I learn to be that king again, with clearer eyes and a wiser heart. The crisis that could have toppled the monarchy instead transformed it. The royal family's handling of the situation, the transparency, the accountability, the very human struggle with betrayal and forgiveness, resonated with the people. Opinion polls showed that while trust in the institution had taken a hit, respect for King Marcus and Prince Alexander had actually increased. Princess Victoria emerged as another hero of the story once her role was revealed. The princess who had chosen truth over family comfort, who had protected the kingdom even at great personal cost, became a symbol of integrity. The refugee foundation she ran saw donations triple as people sought to support her work. In her cottage prison, Anna Volkov followed the news with tears streaming down her face. Her handlers allowed her to watch Alexander's speech, though she had to beg for the privilege. Seeing her son standing tall, facing the world with courage and grace, she felt a pride that transcended her shame. She wrote him letters he would never receive, filled with the love she could no longer express. She cooperated fully with every debriefing, provided every detail that might help the kingdom she had betrayed and then protected. It was her penance, her only way to still serve the family she had deceived and loved in equal measure. A year after the revelation, on a cold winter morning, Princess Victoria received an unusual request. Anna Volkov was dying. A cancer diagnosis had given her perhaps 2 months to live. Her only wish was to see her son one more time. Victoria brought the request to Alexander, who was now serving as Prince Regent, while his father recovered from a mild heart attack, brought on, the doctors said, by 2 years of unrelenting stress. "She's dying?" Alexander's voice was carefully neutral, but Victoria saw his hands tremble. "The doctors confirm it. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. She's refused aggressive treatment, saying she's ready for judgment." Alexander stood at the window of what had once been his mother's favorite sitting room. Now, his office. "What would you do?" "I don't know," Victoria admitted. "I've regretted many things about that night, but never the revelation itself. Still, she's dying alone, and whatever else she was, she loved you truly. Father would never forgive me if I went to her. Your father is learning that forgiveness is more powerful than fury. He might understand better than you think." Alexander was quiet for a long time. Then, Can you arrange it? Secretly? Of course. 3 days later, Prince Alexander traveled in an unmarked car to the cottage in the northern provinces. His security detail was minimal, the visit completely off the official record. The woman who answered the door bore little resemblance to the regal queen he remembered. Anna Volkov was thin, her hair gray and brittle, her face marked by illness and regret. But her eyes were the same, flooding with tears at the sight of him. "Alexander," she whispered, "my beautiful boy." "I'm not your boy," he said quietly. "I'm the son of a woman who never existed." "Then why are you here?" Alexander didn't answer for a moment. Then, "Because even fictional mothers deserve to not die alone." They sat in her simple living room, the space between them feeling like an ocean. Anna didn't try to touch him, didn't presume any familiarity. She simply looked at him, drinking in the sight of the man he'd become. "You gave a beautiful speech," she said finally. "The kingdom is lucky to have you. I learned public speaking from you. Was that part of your training?" "No," Anna smiled sadly. "That was part of being your mother. The real parts and the trained parts became so tangled, I couldn't separate them anymore. Perhaps that was my greatest failure. Or perhaps it was my only success." They talked for hours, carefully at first, then with growing ease. Alexander asked questions he'd been carrying for 2 years. Anna answered with painful honesty, holding nothing back. "The worst part," she told him as the afternoon faded, "was knowing that every day I loved you more, I betrayed my mission more. And every day I stayed faithful to Moravia, I betrayed you more. There was no winning, only different ways of losing. You chose us in the end. That counts for something." "Does it? Can 20 years of protection erase 10 years of betrayal?" "No," Alexander said simply, "but it can stand alongside it. People are complicated. You taught me that even if you didn't mean to." As he prepared to leave, Anna struggled to stand. "I have something for you. My handlers don't know I kept it." She retrieved a worn leather journal from a hidden compartment. "I started writing to you the day you were born. Letters I could never send. Thoughts I could never share. My real thoughts, not the spies or the queen's. Just a mother's." Alexander took the journal with unsteady hands. "I don't know if I can read this." "Then don't. Burn it if you need to. But know that it exists. Know that beneath all the lies, there was one truth. I loved you from the moment I first held you, and that love transformed me into someone I never expected to become." "It wasn't enough," Alexander said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "No," Anna agreed. "It wasn't. Love isn't always enough to overcome our sins. But sometimes it's enough to make us try." Alexander left without saying goodbye, without making promises about future visits. But he took the journal. As his car wound through the mountain roads back to the capital, he held it unopened in his lap, feeling the weight of 29 years of unspoken truth. Anna Volkov died 6 weeks later, quietly and alone, except for her guards and a nurse. Her last words were reportedly, "Tell him I was grateful for the visit." The guards weren't sure who "him" was, but they dutifully recorded it in their log. The palace announced her death in a brief statement, identifying her only as the former Queen Sophia. There was no funeral, no memorial. She was cremated and her ashes scattered in an undisclosed location, as per the agreement made 2 years before. But in his private chambers that night, Prince Alexander lit a candle and opened the journal she had given him. The first entry was dated the day of his birth. "My dear Alexander, I held you today for the first time, and everything I thought I knew about myself shattered. They told me you would be a tool, a prop in my deception. They didn't tell me you would have your father's eyes and my stubborn chin. They didn't tell me that when you wrapped your tiny finger around mine, you would rewrite my entire existence. I don't know who I am anymore. Anna Volkov feels like a stranger. Sophia feels like a mask. But your mother, that feels real. God help me. That feels like the only real thing in my life. Alexander read through the night, tears streaming unashamedly down his face, page after page of a woman's struggle, her transformation, her desperate love for a child she was never supposed to truly care about. The entries chronicled not just his childhood, but her own rebirth. The spy who became a mother, the enemy who became a protector, the lie that became a truth. When King Marcus found his son the next morning, Alexander was asleep at his desk, the journal clutched to his chest. The king gently covered his son with a blanket and noticed the tear stains on the pages. "Was it real?" Marcus asked when Alexander stirred. "Which part?" "Any of it. All of it." Alexander sat up slowly, his eyes red but clearer than they'd been in 2 years. "She loved us. In her broken, complicated, impossible way, she loved us. That was real." Marcus was silent for a long moment. Then, "I've been thinking about forgiveness lately. Your aunt says it's not about excusing what was done, but about choosing to move forward despite it." Wise woman, our Victoria. The wisest and the bravest. Marcus sat down across from his son. "I've been unfair to you, Alexander, punishing you for her sins, seeing her ghost instead of my son. We all needed time to grieve. We're grieving still. Yes, but perhaps it's time to grieve together instead of apart." Father and son sat in comfortable silence as the morning sun filled the room. The journal lay between them, testament to a love that had transcended its own deception. Later that day, Princess Victoria found them in the family dining room, sharing breakfast for the first time in 2 years. The sight filled her with a hope she hadn't dared feel since that terrible night of revelation. "Room for one more?" she asked. "Always," Marcus said, rising to pull out her chair. "We were just discussing the upcoming trade summit. Alexander has some innovative ideas about technology partnerships." As they settled into conversation about state matters and family business, Victoria marveled at the resilience of the human heart. They were not the same family they had been before. They were scarred, wiser, more cautious with their trust. But they were still a family. The kingdom of Valdoria had survived the crisis of the false queen. More than survived, it had emerged stronger, its monarchy tempered by trials and proven in its integrity. Prince Alexander's approval ratings soared as he took on more responsibilities, his painful honesty and evident competence winning over even skeptics. King Marcus gradually returned to full duties, partnering with his son in a way that strengthened both. The relationship between father and son, once poisoned by shared betrayal, grew into something deeper than it had been before, a bond forged in truth rather than comfortable illusions. Princess Victoria continued her charitable work, but also took on a new role as royal counselor for internal security. Her vigilance would ensure that such a deception could never happen again. She carried the weight of her decision always, but seeing her family healing brought her a peace she hadn't expected. On the 2nd anniversary of the revelation, Prince Alexander stood in the palace garden where his mother had taught him about flowers. He held a white rose, her favorite, and thought about the complexity of love and lies, of redemption and consequences. "She wasn't perfect," he said aloud to the rustling leaves. "She wasn't even who she claimed to be, but she was my mother in all the ways that truly mattered, and I choose to remember the love while acknowledging the lies." He placed the rose on a bench where they used to sit together, then walked back to the palace where duty waited. He was ready now, ready to be king, ready to lead, ready to build a future that honored the past without being imprisoned by it. In the end, the story of Anna Volkov, who lived as Sophia and loved as a mother, became a cautionary tale and an inspiration both. It reminded the kingdom that trust, once broken, must be rebuilt with patience and truth. It showed that redemption was possible but came at a price. Most of all, it proved that even in deception's darkest shadow, love could still take root and bloom. The royal family of Valdoria had been forever changed by a shocking revelation. But from the ashes of that destruction, they had built something new, not perfect, not unblemished, but honest and strong and real. And in a quiet cemetery in the northern provinces, marked only by a simple stone reading A.V., she chose love, wildflowers grew. Prince Alexander had arranged it secretly, his final act of complicated forgiveness for a woman who had been both betrayer and protector, enemy and mother, lie and truth combined. The crown endured. The family evolved. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, perhaps Anna Volkov finally found peace, knowing that the love she had never meant to feel had outlasted all her carefully constructed lies. The kingdom of Valdoria faced its future with clear eyes and steady hearts, stronger for having weathered the storm of truth. And in the palace halls, where secrets once festered in silence, honesty now reigned supreme, the greatest tribute to those who had paid the price for its absence. The story of the false queen would be told for generations, a reminder that even in the highest places, truth must prevail. But it would also be remembered as a love story, twisted and strange and painful, but love nonetheless. For in the end, that was the most shocking revelation of all, that in trying to destroy a kingdom, Anna Volkov had found a family. And in losing that family to truth's harsh light, she had finally found herself. The crown's secret had been revealed. The family had survived. And life, complicated and messy and beautiful, continued on.